Good afternoon. Welcome to the spring program of the 42nd Annual Greater Lafayette Holocaust Remembrance Conference. I'm Sarah Powley, Chair of the Greater Lafayette Holocaust Remembrance Committee. Our speaker this afternoon, Ilana Blum, is the daughter of the ship's physician on the Struma, a vessel that was sunk in the Black Sea in February 1942. It was carrying Jewish refugees from Romania, bound for Palestine, and all but one of them perished when the boat sunk. The vessel had been torpedoed by the Soviets, but that wasn't known for decades. Meanwhile, Ilana grew up in Romania as a hidden child. Family friends hid her and her mother to save them from the Nazis. Eventually, Ilana and her mother moved to Israel. Dr. Blum's recorded presentation will be followed by a live QA session facilitated by Dr. Rebecca Klein-Pasheva, Associate Professor of History at the Department of History, Purdue University, and Director of the Human Rights Program at Purdue University. And now, without further ado, Dr. Ilana Blum, who is joining us from Tel Aviv, Israel.
I'm the daughter of physician of the vessel Struma that was sunk in the Black Sea by a Soviet submarine. What I know about the sink is that the vessel was really something like junk, and people paid a lot to be on it in order to save themselves from the Nazis. My father, since he was a physician, he had a small cubicle and some privacy that the rest of the passengers didn't have. So that's why he traveled alone, because the conditions on the ship were so hard that he didn't seem fit to take his wife with him. So that's what I know more or less about the ship. In my childhood, probably my mother was quite afraid for me, so she gave me to a couple of Christian bankers who had a small domain in the Carpat Mountains. And they were the friends of my grandparents. So we all were there. And my mother was somehow of what I knew then, that she was some kind of governess. Every day I was told, the Christians are good, the Jews are bad. Avoid the Jews. I didn't know who the Jews were, but I know this was something to be avoided. At the end of the war, I was told, your mother is your mother, and this couple, there are friends, there are very good friends, and they helped us during the war. What I knew about my father, since before embarking the Struma, he was a physician in the Romanian army. I was told that my father went to the war, that he is missing, but maybe he will come. At the time, I didn't know anything about the Struma, because when somebody started to speak about the Struma, he was immediately shushed and told not in front of the child. So Struma was some kind of mystery, but I don't know, as a child, I wasn't interested by it. But each day I waited for the door to open and my father to come in. What I suspect, my mother also didn't know very much what happened to the Struma people until several years after the war. Nobody knew, I think. And when the war ended, and I knew that my mother was my mother, I somehow took it in my stride. I didn't question very much when I was a child. What I knew, and what I was repeated even after the wars, that at no price should I become friends with any Jewish person. So I knew when I was in the elementary school, this was very easy because it was a Catholic school. So I was like everybody else, Catholic. And I went to the mass and to confessions and whatnot. When the Russians came, actually, I have very good memories from the Russians. They were very kind to me, and I remember that the first orange and banana and chocolate I got from a Russian soldier. And when I finished the elementary school, I was enrolled in a French school for a year until this school was the Romanian government, who then was a communist government. They forbade the existence of all this school, French, American, and so on. They were closed. So I went to a Romanian school until I enrolled high school. In high school, my class, there were some Jewish girls, and this Jewish, and one of them started to convince me that I was Jewish. And I told her, no way. My mother forbids me even to be friends with Jews. And she said, no way, you are not Jewish, you have blue eyes. And in fact, the Romanian and the Christians, they are more or less dark colored with black eyes. The blondes and the fair-skinned and the blue-eyed came from Poland and Russia, and they were indeed Jews. And then when I finished high school, that where faith came into my life, because the last thing when I was in high school, the last thing that I wanted was to be a doctor, to meet Jews. And what I wanted, since my brother, my Christian brother, he was an actor, I wanted also to be an actor. And Faith wanted that at this time, in the Romanian law, made the fact that we studied only 10 classes altogether. So at the end of these 10 classes, I was 15 and a half. It's the mind of a 15 and a half. And all those students who finished with maximal notes in their studies, they were allowed to enroll whichever faculty they wanted. And since I I qualified. I had these biggest marks possible. I was offered as a prize a cruise to Crimea on the Transylvania vessel, which was quite an elegant vessel at the time, a Romanian vessel. And I took this cruise with one of my cousins to Crimea, and I visited Yalta, Sochi, and Odessa. And when I came back, my mother told me, you know, I enrolled you in the medical school. I said, no way, medical school. I don't want medical school. I want to be an actor. And she told me, okay, you know, medical school is all yours now. But if you want to be an actor, you have to do an exam and so on. It would be difficult. Then I started to think about it. And then one of my friends, I told her, I don't want to go to medical school. I want to go to the theater school and so on. And then she told me, you don't want to go to medical school because you are afraid you will fail. I said, I will fail, show you. And so I got into medical school. And I always told my mother, if I'm failing at an exam and so on, I quit. And this was some kind of agreement between us. And as fate wanted, I got the highest marks at each exam. And I was also awarded a scholarship that was equivalent to the salary of an unqualified worker. And at this time, I also knew that I was Jewish, going to this friend. And I knew about the Struma, not very much, but I knew that my father died on the Struma, and so I told my mother, if we are Jewish and my father died on the Struma, what are we doing in Romania? We have to quit. We have to go to Israel. And after a waiting period of several years, we were permitted to leave Romania after my mother renounced all her apartments, everything she had. And we were permitted to leave Romania with 20 kilos each, which were mostly clothes and nothing valuable. When before leaving Romania, I was called to the Israeli embassy, and the man who contacted us told me, you know, you come to Israel, you'll be admitted in the same class that you are here in Romania, and you'll get the same scholarship. Okay, so I was convinced. I come to Israel, I continue my study in the same year, and I'll get a scholarship. When I came to Israel, I met the dean of the students, and I told him, you know, I want to go in the same class. It was the middle of the fourth year, and I want a scholarship. And then the dean of the students asked me, where are you coming from? I said, Bucharest. And he said, no, you are coming from the moon. We don't admit Romanian students at all. And if we admit them, we admit them 2 years, 3 years back, because their level compared to the Israeli students is quite low. So I told him, okay, let me do the exams. If you are right, okay. If not, then you have to do what I'm saying, what I was promised. And after quite a lot of discussions, he said, you know, you get it the same year, but in the School of Stomatology. And I said, I don't want stomatology, it's annoying and so on. You know, you go to stomatology, there is money there. I said, I don't want money, I don't want stomatology. And I was admitted in the middle of the fourth year. And I always went to the dean of the students and I told him, look, I don't like stomatology and so on. And I want to go to medicine. And I told my mother, if he doesn't apply, I quit. And compared to the Israeli students, I was quite young because they went to the school after they finished the army. And I didn't do the army, and I started my studies at 15 years and a half. So compared to them, I was quite young. So, and at the end of this fourth year, the dean of the, and I went again to the dean of the student, and I told him I don't want stomatology. And then he said, you know what? I have a friend, a professor of biochemistry. So if he says you are good enough, you go to medicine. And indeed, I went to work in the biochemistry department. And as fate wanted it, I got typhoid fever, and I was quite ill and probably lost my inhibitions. And when I felt well enough, I went to the dean of the students and I told him, you know what, I decided you have not enough testosterone because you don't want to me to pass an exam to see how I am, and then decide whatever you want. And he started to laugh. And I said, why are you laughing? He said, because you are admitted to medical school in the same year that you ought to be, with a scholarship like in Romania. So this was quite unique. So that's how I became a doctor. And he told me, you know what? In the end, you'll be cross with me because there is money in stomatology, and you look at your friends from stomatology; they will be millionaires, and you'll be quite. And after several years, when I was already established physician, a young lady came to me and she told me, you know, my father told me if I had a medical problem or some health problems to come only to you. And then I asked, who is your father? It was the dean of the students. And at any rate, when I came to my group in medical school, I was greeted with, who called you here? You Romanian, you stole the place of an Israeli soldier. You have a scholarship that was due to us. As this continued like this. And then I was more or less ostracized. They had a party and they told me, frankly, we don't come because we have a lot of valuable things in our apartment and Romanians are known to be thieves, so don't come. The irony of the fact that much later, when there were all kind of places of head of department. The same boy who told me that I came to steal the place of an Israeli soldier and I won't amount to anything. He was also a candidate for the same place of head of department. And this fate wanted it. I got the place, he didn't. And this happened twice because after I was head of department of medicine in one hospital, then an opening of endocrinology, a profession that I liked very much, opened in another hospital, and this boy was also a candidate for the same place, and I got the place. And that continued all the time. At any rate, I finished medical school, and then I had my two children, one after another. And then I enrolled in a department of internal medicine, and where I did my specialization. And then I started my research on that concern mental functions and endocrinology and the correlation between food and mood. And I published several papers on this topic, and then a book that was quite successful. And the book described a diet which was based on physiological parameters in the blood and the mental functions, and well, it worked. And as I've told you, I was elected as head of department of one of the departments of medicine in the Ichilov Hospital. And after 8 years, I was offered the place of head of the Institute of Endocrinology in Bellinson Hospital. And I went there, and I continued until I retired. And it is a semi-retirement because I continue working with private patients until now. And that's about summarizes it. So what I wanted in my childhood, never realized. And I'm here, a Jew in Israel, and the physician that also I didn't dream that I would. That's all.
If you could talk about going to when they found the Struma.
Well, when we came into the country, we met a rabbi whose father and brother also perished in the Struma. And he was the center of the meeting of all the people who were related to the Struma victims. And at this center, we got the message that a young man whose grandfather perished on the Struma was going to do some investigations in Istanbul He was a diver, and he had a group of divers in a place that he saw was a place where Struma was sunk. And all the relatives, we went there. And actually, it wasn't the place, probably. The Turkish authority were quite anxious not to let us to go very far. I don't know what, probably some guilty conscience. And there I met young journalist Katie Collins, and she told me some things about the Struma, namely that the Allies decided to sink the ship because they were informed that a spy was on the ship, and that's why a Russian submarine sank the ship with 691 passengers. My father could rescue some 4 or 5 people. One of them was a pregnant woman who lately was quite rich, and some 3 or 4 other people. One of them was related to young painter who I met when we came to Israel, because he donated a picture in the memory of my father who rescued his relatives. So that's how I met him, and I have a picture also. I got a picture from him. And later on, with Katie Collins, we met the Romanian ambassador in Israel, Mariana Stoica, who died several years ago. And she indeed confirmed the story of the spy and the Russian submarine. And she had even a recording of the officer who sank the ship. And that's all that I know about the ship.
All right. Good afternoon or evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this special discussion with Dr. Ilana Blum at this year's 42nd Annual Greater Lafayette Holocaust Remembrance Conference. We will now move into the live Q&A session. My name is Becca Klein-Peshova, and I'll be moderating this portion of our program. It's an honor to be here and to take part in this important conversation. I'd like to thank you, first of all, for sharing your story with us today and agreeing to answer questions from the audience. I'm talking to you now from my office at Purdue. Today is Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. And I wonder if we might begin our conversation with some of your thoughts about Yom HaShoah. Is there anything particular that you do on Yom HaShoah, or any particular meaning that it has for you?
Yom HaShoah, mostly we watch television, we see all the recipes from the different camps. At 10 in the morning, there is a standstill in all the country in remembrance of all who perished during the Holocaust. So that's it. Mostly everybody. Well, there are people who go to the cemeteries and remember all the different functions, but mostly people stay at home and remember.
Yeah, thank you. I wonder if we might start by taking just one step back from that and thinking about your integration into Israeli society. The first question that we've received has to do.
Well, it was hard. And actually, I think I was lucky because my integration, objectively speaking, it was smooth. Subjectively, it was hard. And not knowing the language, and also people who looked at the newcomers as some kind of intruders, and this happens with everybody. It happened with the Moroccan Jews and with the Russians, and everybody, every newcomer was snubbed. The Romanians were thieves, the Moroccans were aggressive, the Russians were too beautiful. That's it.
Yeah. Did you have any negative feelings about your background due to this, say, not as welcoming
background, but how I was received, like like a thief of the place in the university, of scholarships that I received. People were envious, and they didn't have any qualms about voicing it. But in the end, I got help from some friends in our group at the university, also at the help of the dean of the students who told some friends in our group of students to help me with the language, and so I could integrate.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about language acquisition? How many languages you speak, and which language you are most comfortable speaking?
Well, now Hebrew, although my orthography is terrible and I can't spell. I mean, I make a lot of spelling mistakes, and my Hebrew orthography is terrible. Also, I'm so long in the country. I speak Romanian, Hebrew, French, English, Russian, and German. Not well. And but I'm fluent in Romanian and Hebrew, English, and French. The Russian now is a little bit rusty, although I manage with new immigrants, and it's getting back. The German similarly.
Yeah. No, this is a huge part of the acculturation process.
Yeah.
Did you have language training before coming to Israel? Did you do it in?
No, that's why it was so hard for me, because since I was brought as a Gentile, I had no inkling, no Hebrew, no Yiddish. To this day, I don't know Yiddish. And other people, well, they knew, they had some training, and they knew Hebrew and Yiddish, which I didn't have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, there are a lot of questions coming in about the experience of being a hidden child in Romania and what it was like to grow up in this context, did you know other hidden children or people who revealed themselves later?
No, I didn't know I was Jewish, first of all, until I was 13, 14 years old. So I had the Christian friends. I had this family that was really family that where I grew up. They were linked to, whoever knows the Romanian history, there were families of Greeks that they were coming from Istanbul, from a quarter that was named Fanar. And they were like princelings in Romania. And this family belonged to this Greek population who came from Fanar. And I was quite happy with them. And since my so-called brother, he was an actor, he was very talented and so on. And so I got to go to all the theaters and see all the fantastically good-looking actors. So I was quite happy with.
Yeah. There's a question about how you felt, or what was that experience like of learning that you are Jewish? There's that friend who said, "Oh, you have blue eyes, you have light hair." And this is also unusual for us because the stereotype, right? That at least the stereotype that most people are familiar with, that Jews have darker hair, have darker eyes, and so on. But in the Romanian context, it's not that way. So
No, in the beginning, it was quite a shock. Then the father of this girl who decided that I am Jewish, he got me some books about the Jews. And although in the beginning, as I was quite very wary of being a Jew and I didn't respect them at all, then he gave me the books of Feuchtwanger and some books in the literature about Jews and so on. So my perspectives of about the Jewish people started to change. I said, "Oh, they are not dumb at all." And then I said, well, they're quite, and I read about Einstein, and I love music, and I went to the concerts, and then Yehudi Menuhin came to Romania, and some very appreciated musicians, and they were Jews. I started, oh, they are also talented. And so little by little, my perspective about the Jewish people started to change. And then I decided, if I'm a Jew, so let's do it the whole way, not be a Jew in Romania.
Was this encounter the first time that you heard positive traits about Jews? You mentioned that people said, "Oh, Jews are bad, Romanians are good," and you didn't really.
My mother pumped it to me at least 3 times a day. Jews are bad, Christians are good. You have to remember it, even after the war. I always, she drilled the fact that I should avoid Jews and be friends only with Christians. And that was so until quite late.
There's a question here about your relationship with the family that raised you in this line.
Is the families that saved us.
Yeah.
Well, all of them are dead now, sadly. They emigrated to France, and there their material situation got worse and worse, and I helped so much as I could. And we were in contact until the last of them died.
I'm sorry. There's another question about the decision to emigrate to Israel. As you discovered that you were Jewish, and you mentioned briefly that you thought you should just do this, right? That you if you're Jewish, then you should go there. Can you talk a little bit about your motivation for pursuing immigration?
My motivation was quite simple. I also always wanted to belong, and I didn't feel that. Sorry, my it was my cat.
They love Zoom.
No, my motivation was quite simple. I wanted to belong to a people. And since I was Jewish, I didn't feel I can belong to the Romanian people. So I said, if there is a Jewish state, I go there. I didn't anticipate that my welcome would be so cold and so aggressive. But that's how it was. It was for, as I saying, for all the emigres, it is hard until now. Never mind now the French came and they started to hate the French. No, it's like this. People,
No, immigration is hard even under the best circumstances.
Yeah. And as I say, objectively, I was lucky because I didn't lose any years in my studies. I got a scholarship. I always was promoted. People say that they don't promote women. I didn't feel it. Always when I wanted something or I wanted really a position, I got it. So no, I didn't feel no woman discrimination. No. And from this point of view, I'm not a feminist. I think people should be promoted on their qualities only, not because X is a woman, X is a woman or Y is a man. No, if it's good, if he fits, he should be promoted, he or she, not because she's a woman.
I see you had to do a lot of fighting to get into the program that you wanted. They said, oh, you should do stomatology, it says dentistry. You said, no, I don't want
well,
to.
But in the end of the story is that I got what I wanted. And this didn't take long. It took several months, no? So in the end, I didn't lose anything. I got promoted, I got my degree, I got wherever I wanted. No, it was in comparison with other people who came from Romania or from whenever they either they were not admitted to medical school or they lost several years. It didn't happen to me.
Yeah.
And also they had to pass several exams and so on. No, I didn't.
Okay. Good. It's worth the struggle.
More or less.
I would like to think a little bit more about the process of leaving Romania. I know you mentioned you were only able to take a small amount of belongings with you, and it was 1958, so it was already in the communist regime. It was 10 years into the communist regime in Romania. Do you remember?
Well, at the time we left Romania, we were allowed to take clothes only. No furniture, no jewelry, nothing. And my mother had, she had two apartments, and these apartments were confiscated the moment, quite before we left Romania. I mean, there was a law that confiscated all the apartments of the so-called bourgeois people. And, my mother was considered as such. She had quite nice jewelry. This we were able to ship to Israel through the embassy. And she had valuable paintings by Romanian painters. And these paintings are now in the museum, National Museum of Bucharest. So they were also confiscated, and the Persian rugs and so on. She had to leave everything behind.
Yeah. So were they confiscated? Did you have to bring them over, or were there authorities that came?
No. We left it on place. And then we were told that these things were taken the moment we left Romania. My mother also had to sign the statement that she's leaving all her properties and valuables in Romania willingly when she left the country.
Do you have any special memories of your mother? Something that you feel is really special and helps you remember her?
My mother was, first of all, she didn't talk much. I mean, she didn't tell me much about my father and his relatives. One relative discovered me 10 years ago by publishing a notice in a Romanian paper in Israel. So I didn't know much about them. I didn't know much about my father. She wasn't a very expressive woman. I mean, I don't remember if my mother kissed me. Never. I don't remember her kissing me, no. But she was quite a brave woman. She struggled a lot. From a lady in Romania, she came here. She started to take care on elderly people. She started to clean houses. It was It wasn't easy.
Yeah. Did she ever talk to you about the decision that she and your father made that she would remain behind, or tell you about your birth?
I think the decision was taken by my grandfather. He visited the Struma and he decided that his daughter won't get on the ship. If ship could be called, because it was like a small boat for it was primarily a Bulgarian sort of boat for transporting wood or something, not for people.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. But she didn't talk to you much about it?
No. No.
So
No, she didn't talk much about our past. She had a friend, a Christian. We had these friends with whom we spent all our lives. This couple and their children who we were always together. That's what I remember. My friends were Christian, and she had no other friends. Only this family and of the Baxino family. They were our friends. They were our family. She had no other friends. She was quite a loner. She didn't make friends easily, but she was very talented. She also spoke 4 languages at least, and she was well read. She was a fantastic pianist. But well,
yeah. How do you talk to your children and grandchildren about your experiences?
Well, I don't know what their impression is. I think they think I kiss them too much. I'm too expensive. And well, that's it. My mother was a fantastic cook. I'm not. I hate it. So if somebody wants to bring all the worst in me, they should cook. Unlike my mother, I do have friends. I have at least one friend who is like family. She is very wise. She's, I met her at work, and it is 40 years that we are like sisters. So my mother didn't have such thing. And she, as I've told, she was quite a loner. She was not expansive.
But you mentioned she was a great cook. Do you have a favorite food that you remember that she made?
Oh, she made all kinds of things. She made things as Romanian. The Romanian food is a combination of Greek, Turkish, French, and so on. So she did all these things. There is a Turkish dish that you can eat it only in Turkey. I don't think we have it in Israel. It's called imam bayaldı. Something made out of eggplants and so on. And then she had this great dessert. It's called in French "il flottant." I don't know how to say it in English. It's great. It's made from eggs and whipped cream, and it's very good. I don't know how to do it. I think my youngest son knows to do it. He inherited my mother's abilities in cooking, and his father's. He isn't inspired every day, but when he cooks, it is great.
Yeah, thank you for that. So there are a few people who are expressing their thanks to you for sharing your story in the Q&A box, and ask, what do you hope students will take away from hearing your story? And how do you think that schools can support students?
I don't know.
Yeah.
When I look back, I don't know. I think things arrange themselves to be like they are. It wasn't what I wanted in the beginning. I don't know. Probably my mother was right, because she somehow forced me to get into medical school. And I don't know how great an actress I would have been. I don't know. But all the time, like, things arrange themselves. I didn't feel I had to work very much to get the position I got. It somehow felt in place without me. I mean, I tried to do things otherwise, but no. Things got like they are, because, like they say in Arab, maktub, it is written.
Yeah. Thank you. There are some professional questions here. You know, we should note that you are a world-known endocrinologist, and that people have seen your work. You have many published articles and other works. And there are questions here. Say, what do you feel has been your most important professional contribution?
Well, I think the link between, ultimately, the link between food and mood should be, the most practical contribution, and the diet ensuing from this work. And also, there were some papers on the treatment of schizophrenia, and that I think are quite relevant until now. And some papers that now I got the feedback until now. They are cited in the medical literature, so probably they were good.
Probably. So then, we're also thinking, as we move toward the last couple of questions here. There's another generational question asking about your children and grandchildren, and it sounds like...
I have two fantastic sons. They are very good looking, not that because they are my sons, but they are very good looking. They are tall, they are blonde, they are blue-eyed, And also, they are very handsome, as I said, and they are. No, I don't say it. I see it all around.
Mhm.
And they are very, very talented, and I'm very proud of them, both of them, and also my grandchildren. One is every one of them. They are beautiful. They are talented. They are great achievers. So what can I say?
It also sounds like they've been involved with Jewish culture and life and cooking. So I wonder
Cooking
if
is not my forte.
no one's accusing
As
you.
I said, I don't cook. I never cooked. When my mother lived with us, she cooked. And then my husband, who also was a great cook. And nowadays, I know where to buy food.
Mhm. Do you feel that they are immersed in Jewish culture, that they have this sense of Jewishness?
I think so. I'm learning, because there was a period when I studied Kabbalah Light, and I found it a fountain of wisdom and intelligence. I quit now because, well, lots of other things are popping, but it was a great time when I studied it.
Thank you. Are there any concluding thoughts that you would like to share while we're lucky enough to be talking with you here?
Well, now I just, I'm a person who loves peace. I want peace. I think it is important to respect and to understand everybody who you are talking with, notwithstanding this person is an Arab or Russian or whatever, Jewish or I don't know what. Every person is valuable. Every person should be understood. Every person should be appreciated. Every person has her qualities. And that's about it. Not, I don't like person who hate, who they had this and they hate there. Why is it hatred? Don't have to hate. You have to learn, try to understand the other person. You disagree, you tell about it. You don't hate.
Mm-hmm.
It's about my philosophy. But,
Thank you.
Not everybody agrees.
I agree.
Well, great.
So we'll wrap up now with many thanks to Ilana for taking the time with us. It means a great deal to all of us who are here as students, educators, members of the community, the planning committee. Good evening, everybody. And thank you for joining us for this special discussion with Raphael Blum, the son of Dr. Ilana Blum, at this year's 42nd Annual Greater Lafayette Holocaust Remembrance Conference. My name is Rebecca Klein-Peshua, and I'll be moderating the question and answer portion of our program. It is an honor to be here and to take part in this important conversation. So I'd like to start with a kind of question that's usual for starting an interview of this kind as we think about intergenerational memory. The question is about you. Where were you born? Where did you grow up? Can you tell us a little bit about your home life growing up?
So I was born in Israel, first generation in Israel, in Tel Aviv. And it was regular childhood, frankly. My parents didn't talk too much about the history. I started to hear more, I guess, when I was in my, early 20s. But regular childhood, born in Tel Aviv.
Okay. So regular childhood, and you say you first recall learning about your mother's experiences in your 20s. Did you have any hints before then, or?
Yeah, there was some talks from time to time, and there was this rabbi that my mother mentioned that it was like some sort of a community center not far from where we were, usually for immigrants who came from Romania, and given his father that perished on the Struma as well, that was the rabbi of Bucharest, it was like a center, like a memorial for those Jews that perished. So we used to go there for the holidays, but when I really started to hear about it was in the mid-90s, when suddenly we heard about this guy, Greg Buxton, who's a diver. And my mother mentioned him. He grew up as Christian, and he was a professional diver that he found the Titanic. And then at one point, his father shared with him that he's actually Jewish. And he told him the story that his grandfather was on the Struma. He was in the UK. And he had his company, decided to sell the company and take the money, put a crew together, and they started to do those divings. And the Black Sea is really, really deep. And this was 50 years after the Struma sank. And there was this memorial with all the families of the victims and, all the good representatives of the countries, the UK and Germany and CNN, they were all there. Mm-hmm. And it was on a boat in the middle of the Black Sea, and it was pretty emotional. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. On my father's side, I knew that he, as a teenager, grew up in a concentration camp as well. So most of the family on my father's side died during World War II. So he's my grandfather on my father's side. Mm-hmm. So he was a high-ranked officer in the Austrian army during World War I. Didn't help him too much during World War II. So they threw all of them in a concentration camp in Mogilev. And which I believe is Ukraine now. Mm-hmm. And most of the family died there, and they survived. And my father as well, he brought himself, and he was a physician as well. Despite the fact, as a teenager, he grew up in a concentration camp. So
yeah. That's, I wonder. If you could tell us where your father's family is from. If you say he was in the Austrian army during the...
Yeah, so they were from Austro-Hungary. So their mother language was German. Mm-hmm. So as a kid, when I was speaking to my grandfather, I was speaking German, and to my grandmother, I was speaking Romanian on the other side. So they grew up in a place called Czernowitz. That was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and mm-hmm. It's Ukraine today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so which languages do you speak then?
So as a kid, I was speaking German, Romanian, Hebrew, obviously, English and French a bit as well. I was working for a French company for many years.
Is there a language that you feel most comfortable speaking, or how do you decide which languages to speak in which context?
When you don't speak a language, you lose it. So Romanian, I'm not fluent now. I understand. Mm-hmm. Same with German. If I have to speak it for 2 weeks, it will probably come back. I understand most of it, but Hebrew, English.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In the presentation, your mom spoke quite a bit about stigma against people of Romanian origin, and I wonder if you experienced any of that too in Israel?
I was born in Israel, so obviously I'm first generation there, so I didn't feel it. But Israel is an immigration country. It's like a small New York. It's a small country, the size of New Jersey. And whenever you had those immigration waves coming, so I guess the locals, the ones that were there for a longer time, I don't know if it was some sort of making jokes or stories. So on the Romanians, it was that many of them were thieves. Then you had those immigrants coming from Morocco. They said that all of them have knives. You had the ones coming from Russia. Those were whores. There were always stories. But at the end, everybody mingled, and now it's very hard to say nowadays who's who and who's coming from wherever his parents came. But as a kid, I remember that when my grandmother was picking me up from school, I didn't feel comfortable when she was speaking with me a different language because, I wanted to speak Hebrew. Like, as a kid, you don't appreciate it.
Yeah.
The value of languages.
Yeah. So your grandma used to come and pick you up from school. Did you spend a lot of time with your grandmother?
So my parents is both physicians. So one night my mother was on night duty, the other night my father was. So we were raised grandparents in reality. So my grandmother on my mother's side was living with us, and my grandparents on my father's side were the next apartment. So we were all together there because my parents were never around.
Yeah. They're physicians.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're on call.
Exactly.
Yeah, but this is great. And it's a bit unusual to be in this situation and have grandparents there. Did this, what did other kids think about this? Are there other children of survivors that you were friends with and had?
Yes, I grew up in the early 70s in Israel. So many people came from Europe. So it was not very rare. You had a lot of people coming from Germany and Poland and Russia, and many of them were kids of Holocaust survivors at the time.
Right. But I wish to ask a little bit more about is that you had the grandparents with you.
Yeah, so they were not exactly with us. It was a different apartment, but very close to us, which was convenient, obviously, to my parents.
Yeah.
They didn't need a babysitter.
Right. Yes. This is a very good situation. Is there anything in particular you like to do with your grandparents? Or, your mom had talked in the conversation about how well your grandmother cooked. Did she cook for you?
Oh, yeah. The food was unbelievable. On both sides, by the way. But probably on my mother's side, she was she was a good cook.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a favorite meal that she'd make?
I think this typical Romanian food that was really great. And I started to go to Romania probably for the first time 20 years ago, and I loved that food. And they had some apartments there, 2 houses, 2 mansions, literally, and 2 apartments. We were able to get into 2 of them. Mm-hmm. That the government basically confiscated when they immigrated to Israel in 1958. They had to leave with basically nothing, 1 suitcase. Mm-hmm. And when we realized in the 80s that there's a possibility to sue the government there, and we did, mm-hmm. And it was a whole long process. And the problem is they took our houses and apartments and sold it. Yeah. So what do you do? Who do those houses belong to? It's really problematic. We were able to get into one of them, and really impressive mansion with all of the double staircase. Beautiful. But anyway, we got nothing.
Yeah. Well, it's easy to imagine that where in Romania were the houses? Where did you visit?
So two houses. One of them now is the Ministry of Transportation. It's a pretty big house, is in Ploiești, which is they have those refineries there, a lot of natural gas, oil. So that's one city, very wealthy city. And the apartments were in Bucharest, where my mother started to learn medicine. And I remember she telling me when she was studying medicine there, one bright day, there was a knock on the door, and suddenly 4 families came and told her, okay, hi, we are here. We are moving in. So this was communism. So basically she had her apartment, but she had to live in one room there, basically.
Right. Well, the communists decided how much room each person should have.
Yeah.
And yeah. How were the people who moved in with her? Did she have, were they on friendly terms or just basic?
I don't know. We never discussed it.
I'm going to move a little bit now to some other questions that have come in about your connection to Jewishness. How would you describe your connection to Jewishness?
You know, when you grow up in Israel, you don't really think about it because you're surrounded by it. And, you know, Israel is a secular country, so you don't really, you see Orthodox Jews, but it's a small minority. I believe they make around 10-15% of the population in Israel. We used to go, it was more my father on the high holidays. We used to go to the synagogue, and my grandfather on my father's side, he used to play in the Cheder, you know, those in Eastern Europe where they had those, I don't know, those little schools where they studied with the rabbi from Sadagura. So he was more religious, but we were never religious or anything. So the only thing I did was really going to school during the high holidays. When I moved to the US exactly 20 years ago, so, you know, I started doing it more for the kids, for tradition, like the Friday dinner and like the, you know, the little prayer. But it's important, you know, more, it's not a religious issue, it's knowing history, because those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it, right? Was it Churchill who said it, or Edmund Burke, or someone said it, this Irish statesman? But seriously, if you don't know history, you're doomed to repeat it. It's important.
Yeah, I'm a historian. But it's absolutely true. You have to know your background, your heritage, to understand where you came from.
And you see those now that denounce the Holocaust, right? It didn't happen.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important for the younger generation to really know it and hear those stories.
You know, in this way, you know, there's a question that's quite relevant to this point that came in a little bit earlier, that's asking what kind of actions do you feel should be taken so that the experiences of survivors like your mother and on your father's side, that they would be properly represented in Holocaust history? We're particularly at this point now of transition where there are so few eyewitnesses, so few survivors who are left, and we're having this conversation now, it's in this intergenerational conversation. What do we need to do you think, in order to preserve the memory?
It's education and more education, seriously, because, at least for kids nowadays, it looks really far away. It's not that far. And we see those events of anti-Semitism. It happens today. It happens everywhere. It happens in the States.
Yeah.
In Paris, I haven't seen many people here with yarmulke, and there are Jews here, a lot. but they don't feel comfortable.
Well, yeah, France is very secular and frowns upon religious headgear.
Yeah, but it's not only that. It's there's a big Arab community here.
Yeah. There's a spike in anti-Semitism, and today they are even started putting the jury together for the trial of the shooter in the Tree of Life synagogue in 2018. So, I mean, this is something very real that we have to reckon with, and
that's why it's so important to have a strong Israel. It really is, because if God forbid, if something happens, we'll go back there, and it's really important that this country stays strong. We need to support it.
So, in this sense, I take another step back to thinking about Jewishness. Or do you keep kosher? Or did you change from when you moved to Chicago 20 years ago? Did you start to?
I don't. My wife does. I don't. So I eat basically everything. I have to admit, probably around 7 years ago, I started to put tefillin after many years that I didn't do it. So I do it 5 minutes every morning, and I have to say it changed my life positively. Can't explain it, but.
So do you have a special time that you do it, or when you first wake up?
Yeah, when I wake up in the morning.
That's nice.
5 minutes. It's great. But apart from that, I'm not eating kosher. I'm doing everything.
So in this case, if your wife keeps kosher, but you don't keep kosher, what does it mean for the household? Do you have a kosher?
No, so in the house, we won't have any, she's in charge. We won't have anything that's not kosher in the house. When we're going out, so I don't pay too much attention there. And of course, during the high holidays, I'm always in the synagogue, and I try to support Chabad mainly as much as I can, and Jewish organizations.
Do you have any favorite family holiday traditions, or something special that you do for Pesach or for the high holidays?
We have it as everyone, the Seder. We have one, we don't have two as we have in the States. In Israel, we have one, but it's fun. So we do it, and we enjoy every other holiday.
Okay, so there's a couple of questions now more about your interaction with your mom's career. Did having two physicians, or it's your mom and your dad, did having two physicians as parents influence your career choices?
For sure. So it's really like, so my grandfather was the physician of the Struma. Then both my parents are physicians. And then, by the way, my younger brother is a physician as well. I have one brother. And I remember since I was a kid, there was always pressure on me from my father's side to go and study medicine. And my mother she always wanted us to pick a profession where we'll succeed and be happy. She didn't really push us to any direction. But my father did, and he was a pretty strong personality. And in Israel, everyone, you turn 18, you go to the army, but you have the option, if you're a good student, to go and to join university, to study whatever you do. Before joining the army, you go every summer vacation, you have to go for a few weeks to the army. And after you finish your studies, instead of 3 years, you have to serve usually 5 years. And I was supposed to go to medicine, and then I went on this trip when I was 18 to Europe for 2 months. I came back and I told my father, it was a big drama, that I'm not going to medicine, I'm going to the army. And because to me, medicine is not a profession, it's a way of living. And you really need to love it.
Yeah.
And as a kid, my parents were never home. I didn't see, and they were working very, very hard, really, really hard. I'm working hard as well. Everybody does, but that's really a way of living.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go there. So I went to the army, finished my army service, and then I don't know how I ended up in the School of Pharmacy, which was somehow my father didn't really understand what for him, anything that was not medicine was not really a profession. But at the end, he actually realized and admitted that I made the right choice.
That's good. Yeah.
And I went, whatever, I'm not working in a pharmacy, I work in the industry, and I've been doing it for many, many years.
So there was no pressure to be an actor?
Not actor, to be a doctor. And my father never understood. He always told me I was 3 and I knew I wanted to be a doctor. How come you finish the army, you're 21, you don't know what you want?
Right.
And
right. Yeah. Do you know where your parents met?
I believe they met in Israel for sure, probably in a hospital or through work.
Okay. The next, so is there, have you had the opportunity before to talk about your experiences as a second generation survivor? Have you ever been invited to speak about it before?
Not really, not that way. Yeah, sometimes I was talking to friends or colleagues from work, but not like I didn't get an official invitation to talk to anyone about this experience. But, I'm not shy about it. I've been working for international companies for many, many years. I was working in France. I was working in the US for many years. So I'm pretty open about it.
Yeah, yeah. And I wonder now if, because of the changes in demographics, and there is this shift to more conversations with children of survivors, if you will find yourself engaging more in this kind of conversation.
I'm not proactive about it, but I'm happy to talk to everyone who wants to hear about it, for sure.
I wonder,
and it's important, I told when Eyal invited me, and I knew I'm going to be in France now, and by the way, it's 2 a.m. I said, I don't care, it's important to do it.
Yeah, we really appreciate that. And this is really late, and we do owe you a very nice dinner.
Actually, with the jet lag, I'm waking up now.
Okay, there's a question here that goes hand in hand with what you just said. So you travel around the world and interact with a lot of different people from different nationalities. Does your experience as a second generation survivor influence your interactions with people from different kinds of backgrounds or family experiences?
I'm very open about everything. I'm not mincing words. So, and I'm not shy about anything. So, and Israelis are known to be very direct. And it took me, I've been in the US for, it's 20 years now. So at least the beginning was a bit rough because you have those different codes of conduct. And it was interesting. They always wanted, Israelis, because Israel is a very innovative country. It's people don't even know, but in my field, in healthcare, medicine, a lot of the big inventions started in Israel, the Weizmann Institute, other centers. So they love Israelis because they are creative. Ways is Israeli. You have many things that people don't even know. But they were not always known for being very strategic. Because you have a great idea, but how do you really implement it? And I guess that's a skill that I learned with the years.
Yeah.
taking the creativity, but being strategic about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you find that then you have a balance of your Israeli background and then the experiences in the US and in Chicago that have helped you draw out your career?
For sure. And it just happened. I never planned for it. So, I was working in Israel. I was actually at the time working for a French company. And then I got this phone call from Pfizer that asked me to join. It was a startup. I was the third employee. And we created the affiliate in Israel many years ago. And then we just bought a house. My son was born, my oldest one. And 4 months later, they asked me to move to New York. And this was exactly 20 years ago.
So Pfizer, are you still working for Pfizer?
No, so I was there for 15 years. Then I was working for a German company, Merck, and I'm with AbbVie now.
Mm-hmm.
So AbbVie is one of the large companies.
Because I was going to ask you about the COVID-19 vaccine from Pfizer, and if you had been, created it or, been on the team working.
Because I'm not at Pfizer for many years now. I left in 2014, but so my field is oncology. So I'm leading the global commercial development team for oncology at AbbVie.
Mm-hmm. Very good. That's very important work.
Yeah, huge unmet need.
Yeah. So this is a question that has to do with transmission of trauma. So there are some children of survivors who talk about a transmission of trauma, experiencing in a secondary fashion the kind of trauma that their parents experienced. Do you find that this has been your experience?
I don't know. I don't think this was my experience. Yeah, my father had sometimes this, was a heavy smoker, and was this a result of him having a really tough childhood and being always on the edge. But but this was the extent of it, despite everything. It was a normal childhood. We were not surrounded by this.
Right. Yeah.
And maybe even the opposite, that there was I guess many of those Holocaust survivors wanted to just forget about it. They didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah. Have you talked about it with your children?
To some extent, they need to want to listen as well. So, and I remember myself as well. Only at one age I was, I guess, more open to hear about it. But yeah, and we have the book. My mother mentioned it, Death on the Black Sea, that Kathy Collins wrote, which is a great book. I read it. I have it, and my son read it as well. Yeah, so we talk about it, but not a lot.
So, how old were they when you started to talk about it?
With my older son, I believe they had this project at school when he was, I don't know, in elementary school, probably. And then I actually mentioned to him that you're coming from a family of Holocaust survivors.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I shared this in the book. So this was pretty early. Do your children have a different kind of connection to Jewishness than you do? I don't know, and it depends. I guess it's an issue of age as well. So, we were always going to the synagogue during the holidays, the high holidays. We always do. We went to Chabad. The kids usually didn't want to join us, But it was interesting that when my son actually went to Purdue, the first question was, let's look if there's a Chabad here.
And
So it was funny. So I guess something did sink.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. So they like the Chabad style.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we met Rabbi Avramer.
Yeah. Is there anything special that you would like the listeners who are here on this event right now to take away? Is there, if there would be one thing that they could take away from talking with you, what would you want them, what would you want it to be?
Well, we can't ignore anti-Semitism. And if you hear about it in the news, don't think it won't happen to you and it's somewhere remote and far away from you. You really have to pay attention to it and make sure we do whatever we can to make sure that things like that don't happen again.
Yeah.
Really, we have to remember it.
Yeah. It's closer than we think.
Absolutely, and we need to support all of those organizations to do all the good work, like your organization, to memorize the Holocaust and educate people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for helping with this and for having and for sharing your story and sharing your time at this very late hour. It's been a real pleasure talking with you, and
Same here.
I don't want to keep you up until even later. So I think this would be a good point to wrap up here with many thanks to you for joining us.
My pleasure, and I'm always happy to help.
Thank you. And thanks to all of you who are watching for your questions and for your interest, for being here. And I will now turn the floor back over to Eyal Barash for closing remarks.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Rafi. And it's so, it's really amazing to hear this story again. And I have to say that I first met Rafi, it was about a year ago, actually. We first met at Chabad, and it was Rabbi Glick who said, you've got to meet this guy, Rafi. You've been telling me that for a year. You've got to meet this guy, Rafi. You have a very similar background in the pharma business. And so I was there. It was the like 5 or 6 of us. Turned out we had a lot in common. And I remember distinctly, very quickly, we started talking about the Struma. I said, our history, our backgrounds. And as soon as you started talking about it, I said, you know what? We have a speaker for next year. So I'm really glad that we made it work. So thank you so much. It was amazing. And so really just other than my thanks to Rafi and Rebecca and to all of you, the Greater Lafayette Holocaust Remembrance Committee would like to thank our sponsors in the community and at Purdue and the individual donors who made this program possible. Finally, thank you to all the committee members for their behind the scenes work. And thank you for attending the 42nd Annual Greater Lafayette Holocaust Remembrance Conference, and have a good evening. Thank you.